Hi friends, so a couple of weeks back I just had this kind of moment of very immense gratitude come over me. It was just after we got back from a trip to the Bay Area, Marin specifically, and it sort of just kind of hit me like a wave, and it was lovely, as you might expect. And I realized it was the first time I'd experienced that in a long time. And I'm not talking about like just gratitude more generally. Like I've definitely experienced some gratitude, and you know, there's kind of different versions of that pop up for me all the time, every day, yada yada. But this kind of specific sense of gratitude, which was like a kind of appreciation for the more monotonous, like day-to-day things I was doing, and just like satisfaction with like life, kind of just as it was in that moment. And it was really nice to experience it again. As you might imagine, and kind of the realization that it had been a while since I'd felt that kind of made me emotional. But anyway, this video is going to be a little bit about that. So I'm going to take you through the week before this trip to Marin, which is just like a typical New York City work week in my life. And then I'm going to take you through our trip in Marin. Marin is like a very beautiful town just outside of San Francisco. Yeah, and then after that, I kind of want to just discuss a little bit about gratitude, my specific relationship with it, how I'm kind of thinking about that and like reflecting on it now, especially since having that like kind of experience. And I don't know, I think it's kind of like it can be a hot topic in general, or at the very least like something that can carry a lot of shame for people who don't feel like they exhibit it or feel it properly. So I don't know, I thought it might be kind of an interesting thing to discuss. Before we get into that, I need to introduce myself. My name is Mackenzie. This is my channel Think Too Much. I post vlogs that kind of focus on my life in New York City as a 29-year-old. I live in Manhattan with my husband, and we just try to take advantage of everything that the city has to offer. So if that is of interest to you, please stick around. I'd love to have ya. Otherwise, thanks for giving it a shot. Let's get into it. So the work week leading up to our trip to Marin was, you know, pretty typical, but also very manageable. Like I think we have all experienced work weeks leading up to taking time off where you're just kind of like trying to cram everything in and like stressed out, trying to figure out how you're gonna make it all happen before you leave. That was not one of those weeks for me, which I feel like is important context, you know? Kind of like probably one of the puzzle pieces that like laid the groundwork for the gratitude I was able to feel kind of coming back from the trip. That was an area in my life where there just wasn't added stress, and I think that that helped. Pretty typical work week other than just kind of like preparing for the wedding itself. And by that I mean like, you know, thinking of packing lists and, you know, doing my nails, all that fun stuff. I've been having so much fun putting work outfits together, so most of the footage you see of me at work is my work outfit in the office mirror. Yeah, my last job was like mostly remote, so I didn't really have the chance to get dressed up much, and when I did go in person, it was like a pretty casual thing. I couldn't really like get all fancy, so that is something that I do really like about the hybrid office model. So Max actually grew up in Marin in the Bay Area, and the friend whose wedding he was attending, he is like childhood friends with, but she didn't actually grow up in that area. She just lives in San Francisco now, which is kind of funny. I think she's actually from LA. But yeah, so it was kind of, I think, really nice for him to go back there because his parents have since moved. And Marin is really beautiful. There's a lot of really gorgeous nature kind of surrounding the area, lots of access to really cool hikes, really good weather. Obviously you're super accessible to San Francisco. We did not venture into San Francisco during this trip because we do have a tendency to go to San Francisco like every year. So we figured we'd take advantage of the nature, which we so seldom get in New York City. The wedding was at the Marin Art and Garden Center, which was just kind of a gigantic garden with a couple of facilities on the property to essentially house a bunch of of wedding guests. It was really beautiful and a lot of fun. You will not see footage from it because, I don't know, feel weird recording someone else's wedding for my vlog. Feels a little bit inappropriate, and they've got their own videographer. But she did write a really cute letter to literally, I guess I should say they wrote a really cute letter to, I think, every single wedding guest, which is pretty impressive, thanking them for being at the event and just kind of saying nice things about, you know, why they wanted their wedding guests there and all that. So that was very on brand for this friend of Max's. It was really sweet. But anyway, when we got to the Bay Area, obviously we had to fly into the SFO, and I feel like that's kind of when I had this kind of feeling come over me of just like this like rightness. So it was kind of just really nice to be like driving around, and we were staying with a friend, and I don't know, just kind of like doing just random stuff. We're, you know, getting food and driving around, shopping a little bit, and I just had this like kind of sense of like rightness because me and Max are planning on moving to San Francisco in the future. It's not totally clear what our timeline for that is, but I think what's become clearer is that like that is kind of the direction that we're heading in. So anyway, while we were driving around in Marin, I was enjoying kind of like, I don't know, just like basking in this like idea of the future, and was feeling really excited and like really right in that just kind of feeling and like pull, which is always really lovely. I've been trying to be more like woo-woo lately, which I'm probably using that expression incorrectly, but I like this idea that like just kind of trusting that things will happen as they should happen and just kind of like allowing things to fall into place. I feel like saying that online is embarrassing, you know, because nothing screams privilege like someone being like, it'll all work out for the best, it always does. But here we are. But anyway, I feel like that was kind of like a nice, I guess, example of the fact that I've been successful and being more woo-woo of late, because I had this kind of like feeling like, ah yes, this is right, this is the right direction to be moving in. And not for nothing, like I do think that that sense is like more accessible right now because I'm kind of in a better headspace to kind of receive gratitude and like appreciation for like the day-to-day stuff, which I will get into like the why of all of that later when we're talking about the gratitude stuff. But yeah, anyway, we were there. I was having a blast. Just taking in all the nature, and obviously going to the wedding and doing that stuff and just like feeling really good, I guess, about the future. We went to Sausalito on that first night, which is a pretty excellent example of the beauty of the kind of Marin area and like the Bay Area surrounding San Francisco. Just a really gorgeous little town. They had like a nice like jazz in the park thing happening. We met up with some of Max's friends who live in San Francisco. Really cool of them to make the trek to Sausalito. I think that's like the closest spot from where they were coming from in San Francisco to where we were staying, so that was kind of our midpoint. And yeah, we got dinner there, Mexican food, critically, because New York City just like can't do it the same way that California does it. And yeah, just kind of shot the shit, went to a bar, tried not to, you know, fall over of complete exhaustion, because I think we had like a 4 a.m. start that day. We had like I think we had a ridiculously early start, so we could get there, I think at like 11 a.m. It was a long day. So it actually wasn't until we got back from Marin that I kind of had this experience of the gratitude and like appreciation. Sorry. I feel like I keep talking about like gratitude as this like ominous thing that was like looming over me. I don't know how to describe it otherwise, but just this kind of like subtle hum of like joy and like euphoria and just like contentedness. But anyway, I think that what triggered it was like coming back and feeling like shit because I was hungover from the wedding that we just attended. And I think I was going back to work on like the Monday following. So it was like we flew like during the day, and it was Sunday was technically a hangover day, but it was a hangover day, you know, where you're recovering in a flight. So not the most comfortable situation, and the kind of situation that I would be really dreading going back to work right after. And my prior job, just kind of given the like structure and the kind of responsibilities and all of the things associated with it. And I just kind of had this realization that I like so wasn't dreading going back to work, and in fact was like kind of looking forward to it, like especially going in person and like seeing my colleagues and just like kind of shooting the shit with people and being able to enjoy kind of like the social camaraderie aspect of work and just kind of getting back into my like daily routines. Like I just remember having this feeling of like, wow, but I'm like, it's such a treat to be able to get back to my typical routines in New York, including work, including going into work and like, you know, get to pick up more cute outfits, that sort of thing. And I don't know, I feel like when I kind of felt that like come over me, I was almost like immediately emotional because I hadn't experienced that in a long time. And you know, I may or may not have already said this, but it's not that I like never experienced gratitude, right, in my day-to-day life. Like there are things, there's like kind of different forms, and this just kind of like low hum of like contentedness and like satisfaction with like life, how it's lived in like the ordinary day-to-day was something that I didn't have access to for a long time. Like obviously, you know, this last year we got married. To say I was like grateful for that day and feeling gratitude that day feels just like a woeful understatement. Like, you know, your wedding day is like the best day of your life. Having everyone kind of shower you in like praise and love, and also getting to kind of celebrate your partnership with another person. Anyway, I digress. But I hadn't had that kind of like subtle life satisfaction, like hum of joy and appreciation in a long time, like to the point where I like didn't even realize what I was missing until this kind of feeling came over me. So yeah, it made me really kind of emotional in like a happy way, that it was like, wow, I didn't even realize this existed anymore, even though at the same time I was like so sorely missing it. And I think in a way almost felt like broken for not having experienced it in like a few years, like just like, okay, maybe this is just life now, like that sort of thing. So I mean, obviously, I don't know, I feel like, I know I'm very monotone, but hopefully you understand from like what I'm actually, the content of what I'm actually saying, like pretty kind of emotional thing to realize and like feel and like think about. But I don't know, it wasn't like in a tragic way. It wasn't like, you know, mourning the loss of this time, right? Because it's, at the time I was having a hard time figuring out what was wrong, what was going on, you know, when I couldn't access this feeling, even though I couldn't quite put a finger on what it was anymore. So I think just the relief in being able to access it again and realizing that, you know, it wasn't something that just kind of goes away with like age or just various other kind of structural components that you can't really escape from in life. And it was kind of more to do with some of the circumstances, and like some of the circumstances that I was able to like put a finger on. So I feel like I'm kind of circling the drain here, but basically, you know, I started a new job a couple of months back, and I think that I knew it was like time to move on from my last job for a while. It was, I don't know, it's hard to say like an exact timeline, but there were just kind of signs, and I just had like a sense that it was kind of time to move on, and also kind of time to extricate myself from like some of the kind of pieces of that circumstance that were just like not serving me and were really I think bad for me in other ways, if that makes sense. And it's tough, right? Because I think you have those experiences, and you know, you also kind of go through life understanding that like, what is it, like 50-50 suffering and joy, that like you're gonna be suffering sometimes, it's not always gonna be super fun, sometimes you're gonna be bored, and like especially at work, you know, that's kind of like a new relationship that I'm working out. So I didn't fully kind of trust my instinct around like what was the right kind of like work dynamic to have, and like what was right for me. And you know, it's like, I think we want things to be like all right or all wrong, like very black and white. Like you just want it to be like, well, this was objectively like not the job I should have stayed with, or whatever else. But unfortunately, it's just like more complicated. It's just like never that simple, unfortunately. So it's like I could kind of identify things that weren't really serving me. I think one of which was even like not having an in-office component and not having that kind of camaraderie and like social component. I was able to identify it, but it was hard to say whether it justified kind of moving on, because there were other kind of components structurally that really kind of served me and that were very much a benefit. I guess the reason I say that I don't like necessarily regret the fact that I like couldn't access this feeling for a while is because I was being very thoughtful in kind of coming to the decision to leave my last job, because it wasn't the kind of thing I wanted to take lightly. It wasn't the kind of opportunity that I wanted to take lightly. It was a great opportunity, and you know, I guess I kind of refused to regret being like really sure that it was the right decision, and also just being early on in my career, it's like hard to know kind of what you like and what you don't like and what else is out there, right? Anyway, so this, I feel like part of this kind of euphoria was like probably not coincidentally happened, you know, at a time when I was like finally getting into kind of the rhythm of my new job, and just also being able to kind of compare some of the things I was experiencing in the new job as someone who was like used to it and like knew what was happening, knew what her day-to-day would look like, to how I was feeling at my old job, if that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like the gratitude component is interesting to me because, I mean, I think, and I do kind of like refuse to adopt this mindset, but I do think that there's kind of like this subtle idea that pervades that's like, if you can't access appreciation or gratitude, then there's like something wrong with you, or you're like a bad person, or just like this kind of like, I was never able to do the like forced gratitude thing where it's like, okay, write down what you're appreciative for or whatever else. Like that, I don't know, it makes me feel like a fraud. And I even like worked with my coach at the time on kind of things like that, and trying to kind of circumvent that more like forced approach, and just like figuring out more subtle ways to find kind of gratitude and appreciation. But I don't know, I think that there's kind of something to be said for the more kind of structural or like circumstantial things which might make those sorts of feelings inaccessible, and kind of like, I don't know, the need to accept that and like acknowledge it. I mean, especially culturally, right? Because especially with work, like there are all sorts of different kinds of bad work situations, right? Like abound. So this idea that you'd be then telling those people to like just force the gratitude, you terrible person, be grateful for what you have or whatever. It's not to say that it's like not coming from a good place. I just think that like, if you're like me and you take that message in like I would as a perfectionist, it's like, well, what's wrong with me? Especially because of the privilege component, because like so many of the things in my life were going right, kind of makes you feel like a crazy person. If you kind of lose sight of this like feeling of like contentedness that was kind of a staple before. So I don't know, I guess that's my brief advocacy for saying fuck the haters. And you don't have to be grateful if you're not feeling it. And if you're like me and it's not really the kind of thing you can force, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out ways to more like organically, you know, it's like when I feel it naturally, just kind of thinking about, okay, like what can I do to create more of that in my life, and like coming from a place of like abundance rather than like lack. And then just also kind of acknowledging that like you're not always going to be able to access that sort of thing, and it's totally a bummer. And you know, now I'll kind of move forward knowing that like that's a sign that like something needs to change. And I think I knew it at the time, but now I'll have more context around like, you know, when that change might need to come from the work side, or when that change might need to come from like something else. I guess if I was watching this video several months ago, I would want someone to tell me that the instincts that you're having are probably right. Even if you don't have like all the context that you might need, you might have more than you realize. So I guess let this be another vote of confidence that the instinct and like the draw that's like pulling you away from the thing that you think might be bad for you is something you could probably trust. Obviously every situation's different, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, no matter what, life will be on the other side of the big scary decision you make as an adult. And what is adulting if not a bunch of big scary decisions all the time, especially in your 20s. So anyway, that was our week in New York City. That was our week working from New York City and traveling to Marin for a wedding, and my little spiel about gratitude. So thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, appreciate ya. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and hopefully I will catch you in the next one.